students, parents, and the greater public. But the relationship between science and wellness looks like standing by the science of engaging our own evidence, our facts, and the science that is based on historical and ancestral knowledge, something that is innate in our own bodies and communities. And how do we understand supporting science-led solutions from within? We're not in a lab. This is the real world. And so they're not necessarily always going to be safe spaces that exist. But when we are revisiting wellness to deal with the complexities of the world, we're looking for a safe space and a regulating space for ourselves and for our homes. This is how we come up and we talk about resilience. What is resilience really? And I think it is consistency, presence, breadth, depth. In my own world, in my own life, it's about ensuring that I have a regulated nervous system, that I am home, steady, and still to myself. Because in my heart and in my work, I am dedicated to remaining exposed and soft, sensitive to the nuances of the world. Some call it protecting your peace. In other cases, it's protecting my power. But for us, when we think about what that means across global wellness trends today, the Global Wellness Institute will say, Hyrox has become the everyday athlete's Everest. The gym is still misplacing women's only spaces. At the same time, longevity is moving from the clinic back into community. In some other places, the trends are saying we're spending thousands on supplements. We are tracking everything from our breathing to our steps to our sleep. We even have mood rings that now require diamond cases for the aesthetics. There are more AI health tools than ever, but it's tech versus tech, and 76% of people are trying to get off of their phones. Thankfully, analog living is gaining momentum. We're blasting music from boom boxes and old gramophones. We are watching photos be developed with your click and rewind cameras. What the last of these trends tell me is that we are hardwired to be tactile, to slow down, to touch, to be present with one another. And this is why we are revisiting wellness. So listen closely, take notes, and leave your comments in the chat for questions and the chat later to come with our guests and panelists and wonderful team. My name is Ntabiseng Shongwe. I'm a conversation and behavior change analyst and therapist, as well as your host and moderator for our conversation today. And it is my honor at this point to introduce Dr. Mutamang to set the scene for us in terms of revisiting wellness in 2026 and what this means for us. She is the founder of Spiral Aloe Health and Wellness, a transformation Gestalt practitioner with over 33 years of experience in preventative medicine and integrating lifestyle as a way of practice, being, and medicine. She is a passionate practitioner, and I'm glad for her to be opening up for the setting of the scene of this wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Doctor. May you please come on screen so we can connect ahead of our panel.
Good afternoon. Oh, thank you very much, Ntabiseng. Thank you for that beautiful opening, and thank you so much. I am going to continue with really trying to set the scene for today's conversation. I was watching people on the side introducing themselves on the chat, and I was really, really grateful for the broadness of the audience we have today. So I think, why do I do this work? Why do we all do this work? I do this work personally because it is a continuous challenge for the world that we live in, as long as our health and wellness are concerned. So I do this to challenge myself every day. So I hope you will join us in having this deep conversation. And I have found with these types of conversations, the learnings come from the questions. The learnings come from the interaction. So welcome, and I look forward to the conversation with you today. So thank you for joining us on this World Health Day. We're happy to be back to ponder some of the perplexing questions regarding our well-being. So there is a quiet paradox shaping our world today. we are living in a time of extraordinary knowledge about our health and wellness and what to do about it. That we know. We understand more than ever about the human body, the brain, stress, disease, and what it takes to live well. And yet, we're all not well. We're stressed. We're stressed out. This across professions, across countries, across generations. Burnout is rising. Chronic stress is becoming normalized. And the diseases we now face are no longer mysteries. They are patterns. So globally, the WHO estimates that non-communicable diseases now account for 74% of all deaths worldwide. Let's repeat that. 74% of all deaths worldwide are as a result of non-communicable diseases, those fueled by stress. Conditions deeply shaped by how we live, how we work, and how we manage it. Stress. So the question we must ask is not, do we know enough? Because we do. The question should be, why, despite knowing so much, are we still unwell and stressed? That is why we decided to revisit this concept of holistic wellness. Normal stress is great for us to function normally. You need to be stressed to do exactly what it is I'm doing now so that I'm well prepared. It's good to run away from danger, as in the animal world. For a long time, we have treated stress when it becomes chronic as a personal problem to solve, sometimes to fix by the individual. But what happens when entire workplaces begin to show the same symptoms from one person to the other? Symptoms including exhaustion, cognitive overload, and emotional strain. Recent global workplace studies, many studies done, suggest that over 60% of employees report feeling emotionally exhausted at work. This is a new phenomenon, with burnout now recognized by the WHO as an occupational phenomenon. So what does the architecture of modern stress look like? As Ntabi has explained about this world of being connected all the time. There are forces shaping our lives now. Speed, complexity, and continuous connectivity, all 24/7. We are moving faster than our biology can process, and we are living in a world where there is no longer a clear boundary between engagement and rest. The average person, and I'm guessing this is also across generations, now checks their phone over 100 times per day. Our nervous system is without rest. We were never meant to be on all the time. Human physiology was built on cycles: effort and then recovery, engagement and then withdrawal, activation and then rest. Following the natural circadian rhythm, our body's own internal master clock that regulates sleepiness and alertness by responding to light as the sun comes up and then darkness as the sun goes down. But today, the day does not end. Work follows us home. But leaders, to be precise, shape the environments within which we work. The way we structure work, the pace we expect, the norms we reinforce, the boundaries we ignore. To repeat, the boundaries we ignore. They determine whether people can sustain themselves. Organizational research has shown that psychologically safe workplaces can improve performance by up to a quarter, 25%, while significantly reducing burnout and turnover. This is a statistic that some are still grappling with and they don't believe. So here's the invitation from us for today. We invite you to rethink how you live, how you work, how you lead, and how you design the environments that shape human health. The question is, are the systems at work we have created aligned with the beings that you work with, or ourselves? If you are in a position of leadership, we invite you to go further, to ask not only how do I sustain myself, but what am I creating for others? What kind of environment am I shaping? What pace am I normalizing? What behaviors am I rewarding? What kind of human experience am I making possible? Because every system you touch will either amplify stress or restore wholeness. So do people feel seen here? Do they feel safe here? Do they feel they belong? This is Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. So let me close with a quote from Candy Wines, who wrote that famous book on burnout immunity. And she wrote a little poem before Christmas called The Sacred Pause. My worth isn't determined by how fast I move through life or how efficiently I navigate challenges. The people I love don't need me to be optimally productive. They need me to be genuinely available. When we stop fighting our way towards impact, we create space for the kind of presence that actually change things. Thank you very much, Ntabi. I look forward to this conversation, and over to you.
We live in a time of extraordinary knowledge, yet so many of us are not well. Across the world, chronic stress is rising. Burnout is becoming normal. We know more about health than ever, but we're living in ways the human body was never designed for. Modern life is built on three forces: speed, complexity, continuous connectivity. Together, they create a state of perpetual activation, a nervous system always on and rarely at rest. When the body has no rhythm of effort and recovery, stress becomes biology, inflammation rises, focus declines, sleep weakens, and slowly we drift from well-being into exhaustion. In this landscape, leadership becomes a determinant of health. How we design work, how we use technology, how we create safety. These choices shape the well-being of entire teams. It's time to reintroduce rhythm, to rebuild balance, recovery, and resilience, not as luxuries, but as foundations for a healthier world.
Thank you, Dr. Tiao, for grounding us in presence. I quite appreciate that poem that talks about pace. And I think at this juncture where we get to open up the panelists, I'd like to invite Dr. Teresa, who is here. And it is also my honor to be able to welcome her as we have this discussion about the paradox shaping our world today. I noticed that you spoke about 74% of non-communicable diseases. And I noticed that that's 4% up from the 70% post-COVID. So I'd like to open up with Dr. Teresa, who is a work and at work in strengthening public health systems. She's a director at the Department of Health and Planning in research as well as statistics, and is the former state epidemiologist. She is a champion for prevention and early detection. And to open up this panelist, Dr., I would just like you to just give us a contextual idea of what brings you to the world and work of wellness, and then we can open up our panel discussion. And thank you so much for joining us and bringing yourself to the talk today. Thank you so much, Dr. Teresa.
Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. Greetings from Abuja. So thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here with, and just be part of this conversation about wellness and what we could do to reduce the stress and how technology, which is supposed to make things better, might actually be making us more ill. So it's just a great opportunity to share some of these experiences. Now, would you want me to go ahead and just share my thoughts about wellness, or were you asking me a specific question and all of that?
I was asking, Doctor, if you can just share in your experience what has brought you to the world of wellness to be able to acknowledge this paradox that we've been dealing with between our lived experience of everyday knowledge that we know we need to eat better, we know that we need to move, and then bring it back to what you think we can actually do about that today with the ever-growing complexities that we're dealing with today.
Thank you so much. Okay, now I get the question. So my background is medicine. I'm a medical doctor. And way before, while I was still a medical student, I understood the power of prevention before diseases start, the power of staying healthy rather than having to treat illnesses. So that has always been at the back of my mind. Now, if you come to my house, you hardly find maybe paracetamol, hardly do I keep drugs because I've understood that if you prevent illnesses from taking root, you're likely to do better. It's cheaper, it's more beneficial for you. So that has been that background of understanding, and also understanding that medicines really don't cure anything. They're just palliation. They just make the wound nice to look at, but they really don't cure anything. And so the secret then is to not be sick. And because of that, and then of course, working in public health, understanding the power of prevention, whether it is at the community level, it's immunization, it's health promotion, I have understood that. So another thing that drives what I do is also the power of the mind to influence everything. Now, people always talk about the power of the mind when they talk about their careers. If you fake it, you can make it. If you believe it, you can do it. But I don't think people understand the power of the mind in healing, in wholeness. Now, I'm almost 60, and one of the things I started doing way before was to have a vision board of the kind of body I'd like to have in my 60s and in my 70s. So I have that vision board. I actually just put my face over some nice body that I saw online. And so the power of the mind, and that helps me. I find that that has helped me to keep, whether it's dieting, whether it's exercising, because I have a picture at the back of my mind of on what I would love to look like as I grow older. Then I find that without so much effort, the things that I do, the meals that I take, the activities that I do, they just align, and it makes it painless. So the power of the mind in creating wellness and in creating health is powerful. I also share the experience when I was passing through menopause. And so when people talk about I had a lot of sweating, I had a lot of headaches, I had a lot of flushes. I tell people I went through menopause painlessly. I didn't even know that it came and went, right? And why was that? The minute I reached 40, I began to talk to my body. I understood the power of the mind. I began to talk to my body. And one of the things I used to do was tell my body, you know what? You're a living tissue. You hear me, you understand me. I want you to know that menopause is it's a normal process. We have to go through it. But you know what? We can go through it in a painless way. We don't have to have all of those hormonal things that cause a lot of discomfort for women. Year after year, I told myself that I would stand in front of the mirror and I would make these affirmations and all of that. And frankly, when it happened, it was painless. Again, it reinforces the power of the mind over the body. So I want to encourage everybody listening to this event, to this summit, that your mind can not just heal, but can protect and prevent. So these are the things that have helped me, and I recommend you try it out. So apart from the mind, there's also the activity, visual movement. What you can do to stay healthy is just move. And it doesn't have to be, you don't need to go to the gym. I've had several gym subscriptions that I never used. And so what I just do is walk around my house. It's stretch on the floor in my sitting room. It's just walk around the house, right? Occasionally I run, but I found out that when I stretch, when I exercise and find things that work for you, things that bring up your energy levels, things that allow you to just be subtle, to just be, there's a word I'm looking for, flexible, supple, that's the word I'm looking for, to be flexible, to be supple, to be without joints and pains. You have to find that thing and you have to do it consistently. If you do that, you're going to find that illnesses don't take root. Dr. Mothomang I'm sorry, I'm not getting that right, that name well. But she's talked about non-communicable diseases. These are things that we can easily handle with the daily choices we make. So even in terms of the diet that we have, I tell people that sometimes when you read online, you see some highfalutin diet strategies and meals that are not in your environment, right? You don't need to bother about that. Every individual has been placed in an environment with all the resources you need. So, right where you are, whether you're in Malawi, you're in South Africa, you're in Zambia, you're in Kenya, the diets in your local community have been placed there for your healing and for your health. You don't need to go online and check what is happening in the United States, in Mexico. No. If that were so, if God meant it to be that way, then we would have to pay a lot of money to access things from other resources. I believe that God has placed every one of us in the environment that suits us. So look in your environment, the grains that are there, the fruits that are there, the vegetables that are there. That's exactly what you need. Eat them as raw as you can, eat them as half cooked as you can, eat them in their natural state as much as you can. And you're going to find that you are going to stay healthier, you're going to stay stronger, you're going to stay flexible. So we've talked about that, and also what you believe about your wellness and your, even when it comes to aging, the process of aging, what you believe helps your outcomes. So let me talk a little bit about that. Please give me a thumbs up if my time is running out, okay? Right? Because I don't know what time I have, right?
Yes, yeah. We will also be moving to Dr. Diao as well, so she can also respond. Yes.
Fantastic. So yeah, let me stop there and allow her to have her thoughts. So thank you very much for that.
No, thank you, Doctor. And I think there's some things that I'd like to raise that you specifically mentioned, because there is the narrative that prevention is better than cure. And I think this is a good way to move from the individual to what I'd like to ask Dr. Diao to come onto screen and discuss as what is systemic. Part of the conversations around wellness that you've raised are we have our minds and the power of our minds. We are our own system. And what you've introduced in terms of our indigenous knowledges and our indigenous practices and our environments are also contextual to the way in which we can recover. So I think that is something important to mention, that when we talk about diseases of lifestyle, something comes to mind that we discuss often in Spiral Aloe is called the blue zones. It was a series that was done by Mr. Bhatta, where he traveled around the world to look for centenarians. They didn't, unfortunately, come to the continent, but if we talk about centenarians, there was a way in which they talked about how their community sustained longevity and what those practices were. It was relationships, natural foods, and even though they weren't necessarily the pharmaceutical medicines that I think you have referenced, they were medicinal practices. I think there is a combination of medicine that has always existed, and the trajectory of what that has developed into modern medicine might be something that we can still explore, because integration is also understanding that it's possibly not an either or strategy, but about how can we, with the best tools that are available to us, given the myriad of diseases that we find ourselves with or the stresses that are brought on, can still be supported by both healthy practices or some medicinal practices if they are also required. So at this point, Dr. Diao, if you can come on, I'd like to ask you about dealing with stress at a systemic level. Because, for example, we can take control of our lives. We can have a positive mindset. We can make movement part of our diligence and our routine and practice. But we do wake up and there is the reality of the world. We are faced and probably bombarded unnaturally with the challenges, the war, the conflict, the depression, but equally, there is good news to be spread and good news to be heard. But if you can give us what happens to the individual when we are up against what they call the system, and how do we then deal with that in leadership dynamics where organizations play a role in how people deal with their health or their overall well-being?
Thank you. Oh, I could have listened to Dr. Teresa forever. She's just talking to me. Thank you so much for that input. It was fantastic. I hope you are looking at the comments because they are very responsive to what you said. So I'm just going to, if Ntabi would allow me, before I get into the systemic things, to just acknowledge some of the chats, because I think the response talks to where this is going. And very quickly, to not lose the thread about the blue zones. Maybe by way of reintroduction is that one of the honors and the privileges I have and why I do this work is because I'm truly curious about my now to become 93-year-old mother, who I think, like most of our mothers that brought us working very hard. My mother, luckily, was a teacher, so she was also a professional. But she came home and she had a garden, and they had fresh water, and they walked to school and back. And all of the things that Dr. Teresa was walking about is not new practice to us. But I think, to respond to some of the questions on the chats, is why is it that we're leaving those traditional practices and spending quite a lot of money to source something that is outside our environment? And I think I just wanted to re-emphasize that maybe it is time, with all that is coming at us, to just sit down and be quiet and reflect on where we come from. I know that the Blue Zone research did not come to the continent, but we know that the fruits that you eat seasonally, Dr. Dumi, I see your question, have a rhythm. Nature has a rhythm. Nature has a rhythm, so there are certain fruits and vegetables for winter. There are certain fruits and vegetables for the seasons. And I think if we move with the nature's rhythm, then we really will be well and sit in the environments, as Dr. Teresa has said, that produce all of this together. Maybe that for me would be a really important takeaway. Margaret Joy from Swaziland says, we should eat our DNA. I can't agree more. We should eat our DNA. And maybe for me, that is why I have a small garden at the back in pot plants. There are vegetables in pot plants because I believe in this. So I just wanted to agree with everybody about this. Valda says challenges with waking up early in the hours of the morning and going to gym. I will raise my hand. Like Dr. Teresa, I've never been a gym person. I've made somebody really very rich in paying gym membership. What I have now found is getting into a rhythm of walking and walking around the house. And I think it moves with my body. It moves naturally with who I am. And it's much easier to sustain that way. So I will pause there. I will now try to answer your systemic question. So we work with leaders, and maybe in the last 10 years, we focused on chronic stress as an individual concern. You must go to the gym. We'll pay your gym membership. This is how we responded. We opened up, you remember the days when wellness days became a big thing. Once a day, 365 days a year, we go to do, and we jump around and we do that. And we come back to exactly the same environment that caused our stress in the first place. And so the world is moving towards this. So when the WHO declared in 2019 that chronic stress is actually moving to burnout in symptoms, is that we should treat it as a systemic issue so that we do not put the pressure of dealing with chronic burnout and its symptoms in burnout as an individual concern. So this is how we see organizations around the world now responding systemically to move with the individual in alignment to address burnout and stress. So for instance, if you allow me, let's talk about technology, the ever-present technology. If you call somebody at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon when they're watching their child play soccer, what is the intention? If you send somebody an email at 2 a.m. on Friday or Saturday, what is the intention? So one of the biggest systemic things that most companies, especially the motor industry, mostly the German companies, have really been leading in trying to get in policies and systemic interventions to try to actually change the structural barriers that stop people from being well. So that's one of the biggest things that has happened. The banks, the big banks have also started doing this. I'm not aware, I think our banks in South Africa has also started doing that. So 30 minutes before an official start of the day, they open up the servers so the emails can come in. They do not mind if you send that email at 4 in the morning, it's not coming through for me to respond to it. Then they shut it down after work so that even if you are sending it at 9 p.m., it is not coming through for me to respond. So we see systemic responses, and I think an acknowledgement by leaders and leadership to try to really recognize that the human body is not going to sustain this 24/7 switch on. I will stop there for now. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. I think raising the conversation to what is actually being done, I think does move away from the narrative that there is nothing that we can do. One, we understand that we have personal responsibility and collective responsibility to each other, but there are organizations and ways in which we can respond to the ever on. I do like the idea of introducing micro steps, because I think we tend to think of it as the Wellness Day approach, as you mentioned, but ergonomics looks like a 5-minute walking meeting. The practice of send later triggers the mind to be able to say, I am conscious of the person that is going to receive this message. And as you mentioned, what leaders can do is themselves, possibly ourselves, becoming intentional about what are the practices in the power dynamics that exist within institutions to become aware to say, I am asking you to be on how do I create that blockage? So what does movement look like? The 5-minute walking meeting. What does boundaries look like? Even if I have a rhythm and they call myself a night owl, I will activate send later so that the email only comes in at 9 a.m. There is something that is raised in the conversation of health and wellness sometimes, but if you are not in emergency medicine, maybe as leaders, we need to take a pause and to say, how do we actually determine urgency versus importance? And there are many matrices that deal with this. How do we prioritize the tasks before they pile up and become something that become difficult to respond to? So I'm also very curious about that in the way that you have raised it. It's not just our personal responsibility, but how do we inculcate that into the fabric and the culture essentially of institutions. So it is not just a wellness day once a year. But how do we, and Dr. T, Dr. Diao, you've raised your hand before I move to Dr.
Yes.
Teresa.
Sorry, if I may, I'm also just watching the chatters and minding that we don't miss the conversation. So Maxine says, can't the blue zones be created? It is a brilliant question before Dr. Teresa comes in. So since the research was done, Maxine, there's a program that has started and it's spreading worldwide. So the 5 countries have the blue zones. Singapore has just been awarded the 6th blue zone. And so what they do is there's a set of criteria that they will propose to you as a community or a country that you tick, and these things include creating bicycle lanes, creating walking spaces, having nature around, creating waterways, and living intergenerationally. Singapore has really led in this blue zone creation. So yes, you can create blue zones, and one of my passions is I wish here on the continent, here in the cities that we live in, we can start those programs where we recreate communities that become the blue zones. I'm done.
We're not done with you just yet, Doctor, but we will bring you back. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And just to ask Dr. Teresa to, as we talk about how do we create the environments, how do we recreate certain environments, revisit older environments, could you maybe speak to, as you have said earlier, I cannot rest. And I think maybe this is very important because we have always had the 24 hours in a day, but there still seems to be this idea that there isn't time. How does one realistically get in, as Ms. Valda, I think, had said earlier in the chat, the 7 to 8 hours? Realistically, there are family commitments, responsibilities. We have work, we are moving, but we're not moving enough. What does that look like without the narrative of punishment that is saying we're not getting enough rest to be able to recharge and reprocess? Taking into connectivity, if you're looking at your blue light before you go to bed, it is disrupting your cycle. So can you maybe give us, how do we create the boundaries to protect the time that we need and practical examples of protecting that time to reset as well?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So let me just add something to the systemic influence that Dr. Diao talked about. So there are certain things that you can do something about, like she said, you can control the emails, you can control the work hours, but there are also other things in your environment that are completely out of control. So let's say you're off to work in the morning and there's 1 hour long traffic, right? And you have to deal with that. Assuming you have to deal with that every single day on your way to work, that's out of your control. How do you deal with that? Let's remember then that stress is not just the traffic situation, but it's your response to that traffic situation. So you could imagine two people on that traffic. One person is just chilled out, they're playing music, they know that, well, this traffic is going to take another hour before they get to work. So they relax, they go through the process painlessly, they get to work and they're smiling, man, today was horrible. And they're laughing about it. Someone else in that same traffic is angry, he's honking, he's yelling, he's sweating and all of that. Same situation, completely different reactions. The two people are going to have a completely different bodily response to that situation. One person is going to release cortisol and the stress hormones and adrenaline that is going to up their blood pressure, predispose them to cancers and hypertensions and diabetes. The other person is probably releasing healing hormones, calming, has been listening to music and all of that. So in terms of the system, our response to what we experience is very, very important, and you have to be intentional, especially when it is something you can't control. So you live an environment where there's conflict, right? You didn't start the war, you didn't start the aggression. How do you survive and still be smiling and still be healthy? It's got to come in from inside of you. So let's keep that in mind. There are certain things we can control, there are other things that are out of our control. We have to live and thrive in that world. It has to come from somewhere inside of you where you find a peace that the world cannot give. And you know that this is what you have to deal with. Now, talking about how do we control our screen time, our habits, and ensure that we're having the rest that we need. So this kind of forum or fora is an important one because it creates, sometimes we know all of these things, but sometimes you just need a word to remind you, you know what, can you go to bed? What's the difference? What are you doing between 9 and 11? If you can go to bed at 9 p.m., if you can get it all done and go to bed at 9 p.m., the work never ends, right? It never ends. Once we understand that the work never ends, then it helps you to prioritize the things that you need to do. Also, pulling ourselves in too many directions at a time is one of the things that, especially for us women, you're trying to be perfect in everything. You're trying to make sure that the family is well, everybody has eaten. You probably haven't eaten. You're trying to make sure that, you know what it means, especially for women. So we need to understand that we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to get it all right at the same time. If we can keep our engagements maybe not beyond 3 at a time, finish one project before you add something on. I fault myself with that. I mean, I love to do 6, 7 things at the same time, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. So I have to keep reminding myself, don't take on this project at this time. Don't start this project at this time. So that longing to always want to overperform and to also be seen as overperforming can be detrimental to our health. So it's something we have to be intentional about. It's something we have to plan around. Tell yourself, I'm going to bed 10 a.m. every night, 10 p.m. every night, except once in a while. But once it becomes a long and a chronic system where you don't go to bed before 1 a.m. every single day, you can get away with it for 1 month and 2 months. But down the line, 6 months, 1 year down, you're going to burn out and it's going to show. So yes, in critical moments, you may need to put in all that work, put in the hours, 3 a.m. and all of that, but let it be short-lived. Stress, our body thrives on stress, but it has to be a short burst of stress that brings the adrenaline up, but it has to have that dip where you deflect, You breathe in, you relax, and give yourself time to recover before you take up another stressful period. So it will have to be, like I said, we know these things. We just have to be intentional to actually put them into practice in our lives. Of course, we know what it means going to bed on the phone. We all do it. We're scrolling on that phone, we're on TikTok and YouTube, and it's so entertaining. And before you know it, it's 3 a.m. and you have to wake up at 5 a.m. or thereabout. So over a while, your body will pay the price. So if you understand that, then we can be intentional about the decisions we take.
Thank you so much, Dr. Teresa. I really enjoy the practical ways in what you have said as planning. There are 24 hours in a day. And at the end of the day, you then look at your time and say, how do we step back and actually carve out those moments? As Ms. Valda has said in the chat, she says that there is one Sunday that is actually a no-tech day, which we actually have to curate and be intentional about. There's another comment from Ms. Joy that says, how do we, for lack of a reference, create blue zones in our families and communities and localize these wellness initiatives outside institutions? And I think this is an interesting way to not just speak about the individual, because I'm doing all of the right things. I'm getting my rest. I found a way to dance in the car on the way to work. And so in my space, to the best of my ability, I've been able to protect this, which is important, but we don't live in isolation. And with all of this connectivity, it is still strange to see that we have a growing loneliness epidemic, that while people are trying to embed some of these practices, the other end of this is a lot of us, even on this call and in our own lives, are surrounded by people who are younger than us. And in our places, either as sisters, mothers, leaders, are surrounded with people who are not necessarily able to connect. So it is not so much that we are struggling only in communities, but there is a sense of this disconnect, even with all of this connectivity that we are experiencing. And Dr. Diao, if I can pose this question to you, what does helping and sustaining loneliness, and I do not feel like I am capacitated to be able to respond to this ever on by myself, because burnout also is not just a function of the individual. It is not just a function sometimes of the system, but it is that we are not able to tap into the resources that are our communities, our families, our relationships that would otherwise help us to delegate, to lean on, to cry on in a way that is actually sustainable. And it's historically the way in which we supported each other through stress. So if you can give us a little bit of feedback on with loneliness. I know currently next about the manosphere, which is a complete swing shot in one direction in terms of masculinity and those conversations. And at the other side, we are challenged by what is going on in the news in some relationships. So there are dynamics of disruption, and a lot of that stems from an abhorrent disconnect in the world as well. So how are we dealing with loneliness? What is that practice in revisiting this integration community?
Yeah. One of the practices I introduced when I started putting positive pressure on me to practice some of these wellness practices is when you realize you're becoming alone and lonely. You leave home very early. As Dr. Teresa says, then you're fighting everything along the way. By the time you get to work, you're kicking down the doors and doing that. But you come home again very late. And really the only connectivity to other human beings you have is the people that are around you at work. And you're lucky if those are healthy relationships. Often they're not, if you're not aware of how you engage people, whether the environment is safe enough to have, because our relationship with people is really physiological. What do I mean? As leaders, how we treat others impacts their biology. Dr. Teresa talked about cortisol. We actually must take note. We must really just like charge our awareness batteries seriously in this work on how we enter spaces and how we impact on people, because we affect people. And that relationship, positivity or not, actually affects our connectivity, our loneliness. Because if you create in that 8-hour space that is called work, where you spend a lot of time with humans, a safe environment, that's your first community. If you go home and you become intentional about creating positive relationship in the home, and I say this deliberately because a lot of people will tell you a lot of strife is created in the home. We know this is true. A lot of pain is created in the home. So be very intentional about those two important spaces that you're going to create relationships that are healthy. In the home, to the extent you can, your partners, your children, your relatives, and then in the workspace. But around that two spaces is how you create new communities. And I read something, and I hope people have seen this. There's something that's trending with the wars happening and everything coming at us that is completely out of control. Young people are going back to churches. It is an amazing movement. They are filling churches that 4 years ago were totally empty. I am very curious personally, because we're talking about the loneliness epidemic. What is happening? And these are the paradoxes we live with. As we sit and ponder about the loneliness epidemic, the youth are responding in the most unnatural way we expect. So I think personally, I am very intentional about creating spaces of connectivity in the spaces that I occupy. Finally, the other thing I have started doing, and I stole it from sessions like this, is just pick up the phone and call somebody you haven't spoken to. Every week there's somebody new you connect. You remember a friend, you start seeing that you're creating a community of support around you. These are practical things you can do. So I think when it comes to loneliness, it is a real thing. Again, the WHO has now declared it an epidemic, which means it's serious enough. It is affecting our health if the WHO is getting in there. But I think we need these practical examples, and I would like people to share how they're dealing with being not lonely. I would like to also respond to some of the things on the side that are coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I, in fact, want to pick up some of the things that have been mentioned in the chat. I think it's important, as you said, to mention. One here, I see that Monet is talking about boundaries, and how do we create this, and what does a boundary mean? Because I think we hear that word, but practically, what does a boundary mean? I think is an interesting question to answer, because at the same time, if I want to protect my time and protect my my hours or my space, we live as relational beings. And so how much of that, when you are a parent, or you may have somebody that you're a caregiver, you might have somebody that you're taking care of in your home or in a relationship, you might have children. So what does, one, boundaries look like? And two, we have Dr. Dumi, who has commented on how do we introduce some of these life-saving and life-enhancing tips for youngsters and teenagers who we don't want to cramp their style. So these two, I think, they have overlaps, but I do want to separate the questions because I think it is important that, one, what does boundaries look like, and how do we actually create boundaries as we're planning to take care of ourselves? But two, what does it look like for young people who, if we don't stop them from hunching over, are going to physiologically develop shorter thumbs? Our biology will be physically changed by the hunching over of our shoulders, and they will be standing in circles all on their phone and no longer kicking a tennis ball, for example. And we're seeing that happen even as they're returning to churches. So one, maybe we open up with boundaries. What does boundaries look like even as we're practically reconnecting to protect ourselves? And two, how can we introduce some of these life-saving practices to teenagers? So Dr. Teresa, I will give you boundaries. What does that mean? Personal time, but in relational spaces. How do I actually do that? And then Dr. Diao, if I can ask you afterwards to then talk to the young people that are either nieces or nieces, or we can switch them around. Dr. Teresa, if you want to take how do we talk to young people with technology, and Dr. Dia, I'll give you boundaries
Okay.
when we are caregivers, or both.
So that's why, just yesterday I went out with my kids and went for an event. And then along the way, they just left in the room and went into a side room and they were just on the phone. And I almost went crazy. I was like, this is where you're supposed to be, and all of that. So I think as parents, we just have to model. Model. Unfortunately, even parents are not modeling the right behavior. You get into the home, the father, the mother, they're on their phones late into the night. And so it's difficult to even tell a teenage kid, hey, get off your phone and go do things, right? So I think it has to start with modeling. And the days have so changed that the things that my kids tell me now are things I never thought that kids would tell their parents. It wouldn't have crossed my mind to tell my parents those kind of things. Like, why? Why should I do that? Like a kid would literally ask you, why should I do that? Like, you didn't ask those questions. They tell you what to do, you do it. But now they're asking these questions. So, and again, cramping their styles, I think it has to be modeling. That's the best example. If we model that, okay, from 9 p.m., we're no longer on the phones, after a while, it will kick in. An example of some of the things we've successfully done is the phones in church. If your community is like mine, you'll see that even in church, people are texting, people are playing games, people are doing all sorts of things in the church. In our home, the phone doesn't come out in church at all. So the kids have picked that up. So you could go into a church and you see that other kids are on the phone, not our kids. But then once they can't wait to get out of that door and then the phone comes on. So I think as early as possible. So when it comes to wellness, whether it's exercising, whether it's reading, whether it is eating well, you have to model it. If you don't cook healthy meals at home, kids will grow up not understanding the power of healthy meals. If they don't grow up seeing you pray at home, if you are a prayerful person, they will grow up not understanding the power of that. So everything has to, even when you're talking about telling young people about money, about love, about marriage, about whatever it is, the home is the cradle where it happens. And here's the thing, when you have talked and you have modeled long enough, just let it go. No matter what happens, no matter how rough it looks like, they will always come back. You will see ultimately that saying, that scripture that says, if you raise up a child in the way they should go, they will come back to you. The danger is in not teaching at all. So whether it's in exercising, model it. They don't want to run, you exercise, you show, eat well, have a right mindset. The words you speak, let them be wholesome words. Sooner or later, no matter how rough they turn out to be, they will come back to that early childhood where they grow up. We've all seen that. So the important thing is share the message. And the earlier you start, the better. Whether it's even sexuality education, the way they carry their bodies, the way they dress, the earlier you start, the better. And don't worry if it seems to go wrong in the early or late teens, it will come right back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Teresa. And as you are talking, I'm seeing some comments in the chat about how do we speak to the different age groups where schools used to be distractions from family. We have from Ms. Valda here, and that there's a lack of play. I want to highlight play. There is a workshop that speaks to our inner child. I think we've heard this in various forms about the inner child, and sometimes that's demonstrated in movement. Nowadays, that looks like hobbies. We might not necessarily have time, but I think there is also something to be said of reintroducing playtime. Playtime can be in the form of chores, because sometimes the mundane things that we think might not necessarily be something that keeps kids away from their cell phones is because they are bored. How do we make chores fun? How do we create a chart on the board? How do we ensure that they're outside so that those relationships are stimulated away from technology or from screens? Do they have hobbies? Are they using stickers to stick and taking newspapers and using scrapbooks in cost-effective ways to take them away and go back to tactile? Are they crocheting and doing it badly, for instance? So I think what you said about modeling is also for us to get moving, is to play, is to create moments of cooking together that allow young people to get off their phones and to practice in play and demonstrate that and to provide. No phones at the dinner table is definitely something that I think needs to be picked up as well. We also have from Masedi Beng is to reconnect with friends and family and make that a habit and demonstrate calling the grandmothers who might be further away, and the cousins, because now we all, as we have said, even in this room, we're international. We're not all living in the same spaces as communities did. Our cousins who we grew up with no longer all sleeping on the same mattresses in the same room growing up. So those relationships actively have to be nurtured and technology does provide those things, but how do you model it in a healthy way and keep that stimulated whilst we're going? We have another comment that says, how do we talk about being this local and this global community? And maybe that is something that we talk about, that the relationships are maintained both in the local and in the across connectivities. So I think that is one of the reflections that has been very interesting for us coming from the chat. And I thank you, Sis Joy. I think I saw that comment from you. Maybe we can move into, once we are looking at how to reconnect and stay grounded, what are, if we are feeling overwhelmed today and right now, some of the exercises and rituals and routines? You have both mentioned something I think talks about the ebbs and flows of nature, of our natural bodies. How do we introduce routine that allows us to stay in rhythm? There are things that are, one, very biological. Some of us are moving in 28-day cycles. Some of us are moving in 24-hour cycles. Some of us are stimulated by different circadian rhythms. Some of us tend towards a different time zone. So how do we create those routines that actually help us through, I am currently overwhelmed, I'm not necessarily sure how to speak about this? Because I think it's one thing to come to the spaces that are here, but how do we speak up in an environment where we feel like it might be difficult to do so? How do I go to my friend and say that I'm struggling? How do I approach my HR without having implications on my work environment? Because we can know these things and want to implement them to become a little bit more resilient, but sometimes it is difficult to speak. So maybe Dr. Diao, if I can ask you, how do we actually speak up if we are struggling? What are the things that we can do? Because I can't do it by myself anymore. I have reached my wit's end. I'm trying to get more sleep. I am, struggling with trying to put these routines in place. How do I ask for help? I think that's a very practical way to say, how do I raise my hand? Who do I go to? And what does that look like?
Yeah.
In either the
Thank
personal
you.
or
Thank you very
organizational
much.
space.
I mean, there's a lot of very fruitful discussions happening
Yes.
on the side. Somebody says, how do you create blue zones in your environment? And I think some of them we can't solve today, but the blue zones have a factor of 9. The 9 things that have been a thread through how they do that, relations, how they walk and the nature of the relationships, what they eat and all of that. And I think answers the question, which means you can take those principles and apply them at home. I like Bridget's discussion about they haven't yet introduced screen time to that child. I mean, really kudos to you, because this is one of the most difficult things to do in today's world. And Yemurai talking about homework is really crosses the boundary. But again, I come back to the question you asked. So it's a two-way intervention. And Dr. Teresa talked about, for me, what I call personal resilience. This world we live in is not going to change. It's moving and it's going to move faster. Let's just make that point clear. So I think part of this discussion for me is fundamentally understanding that there is work that we as individuals we need to do to build our resilience, to bolster ourselves and against all of these things, the stresses that, so what is it that we can control? So I want to go back to Candy Wine's, the poem that I read at the end. She wrote the book, Burnout Immunity, to one, address a very curious thing that she noticed. She interviewed 500 people from different corporations and noticed that there were 4 things that they developed. People who work in the same environment, come from the same organizations, but do not get burnt out. They just do not do that. And the summary point about that is that they've got a very high level of awareness. They've got a very positive mindset about the world, almost an optimistic outlook to the world. And they fully understand that certain things are beyond yourselves. You know, this hero thing about working around and thinking you can control things is not part of that DNA. And finally, they have rituals that they have set that build their own resilience. So this, I just wanted to start that there's a certain thing, and it's called AMA, you know, a very high level of awareness, emotional intelligence about what it is you can control and what it is you can't, your mindset, and then the resilience you build. The other thing that you're asking is, but how do I do this and align to the environment that is resistance? People have started doing this. If that email drops and it's not urgent, just watch what happens if you just stop and not respond. Because sometimes you almost have to push the boundary to teach, so you model your own response by teaching your boss how to react within reason. This is actually the most difficult thing. That is why you have to introduce it at a systemic level. And people have started doing this, like, I have seen your email, I will with respect respond. So maybe you just calm down the anxiety, because a lot of bosses actually are not aware that they're causing a lot of anxiety in the environment. You respond very calmly. You say, I have acknowledged your email, but I'm just busy with something right now. I will respond to you in 2 hours. That removes the anxiety for everybody. They know you'll respond and then they'll come back to you. So systemically, when you have built your own resilience, you have to actually model it. Sometimes we think leadership is about the person you report to. Leadership sometimes is about you teaching your boss how to react and how to lead you. So I encourage people to start modeling the behaviors that protect your wellness in the most respectful way. It really creates an environment where the boss starts learning about this building resilience as an individual response, but also creating environments where your resilience can actually be in alignment with the environment. Again, I see a lot of comments on the side.
Yeah, the comments are, I think it just shows that this is something that people are really, really passionate about. And one of the things I would also recommend in terms of, for women, I think it's easier. Women talk, speak out much more than men, data suggests. And so what I found works for me is actually breaking my annual vacation into bits and pieces. Rather than wait until the end of the year to take an annual vacation, I would take 1 week off officially and just go off and do some other thing and just get out of that space for a while and then come back in. So and not wait until I'm sick and then I'm taking a sick leave, but to actually take my annual leave, my 30 days of working leave, and take into 10 days. After a quarter, I take another 10 days, maybe leave one for the end of the year so I can spend Christmas with my family. That has worked for me. By the time I take these 10 days off and a couple of weekends, I come back and I am refreshed. I'm looking forward to that. So the capacity to hand over, to delegate to someone else, where you remove yourself from that environment officially, and not just because you're sick, but because you're actually taking a break. I think I found that very powerful and very healing. And then basically speak out. Often you'll find people who are willing, and again, the faith community is another powerful network where you can speak out and tell people what you're doing or what you're going through. The important thing is to speak out. If you're experiencing things, you're hearing voices, you're not happy, your health is failing, do not wait until the last minute. We've seen women who discovered they knew they had cancer, and nobody knew in their intimate community until they were ready to go.
Yeah.
Like, how is that even possible? So those are some of the things that we need to do. Just speak up, no matter what it is. Forget about the stigma. It might not be easy, but just let people know what you're going through, and you'll be surprised how much support you're able to get.
I would like to follow up with Mevalda. Thank you very much. You say that you will invite your 17-year-old. I would like to take this opportunity to say, I think the next discussion we all must have is not our age group. We actually have to have a serious intergenerational discussion around technology and how the youth, you will be very surprised. I intentionally have these discussions. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Dr. Magadlela, I'll talk about sleep right now because there's a whole science behind sleep. That is part of the reason why we're getting burnt out. But Ma'am Linda, I like how you wash dishes to meditate and you read the Bible and you do that. You know, I think for me, Miss Linda, what you're sharing is with complicated simple life and how actually it heals. Simple life heals us. I mean, it's like sitting. I was just joking actually the other day about, you know, actually on an average day, sometimes washing dishes when I'm not stressed is the most meditative thing I do, with the warm water, soapy water, and do it very slowly. So some people it works, some people it does, but all of the things you say, jogging in a serene environment. And to sign off on jogging in a serene environment, for some of you who like reading, there's a book called Wow, The Wow Factor. The awe factor, the awesomeness of nature. There is a science behind looking at water bodies, looking at wide spaces, it's healing. Because what it does, it secretes all this happiness hormones, the serotonins, the endorphins, and you just sit in nature and you feel calm. You are secreting calming. There's a whole science. Your hormones are very happy with you, and that try to spend as much time as possible. Now, to come back to Dr. Magadla's question about sleep, I think we cannot have this discussion and not touch on sleep and the ritual of sleep. You couch it by saying some people are early risers, some people work at night. It is recognized around the health that, yes, the sun rises in the morning. When the sun rises in the morning, it starts wakening up chemicals that actually fire up the body to sustain us for work. And when it sets in the evening, it starts shutting down the hormones of activity and then rises your melatonins to prepare for sleep. But truly in the world where we live, the night workers, so you can switch the circadian rhythm to suit you. Because if you work at night and that's what happens, what you want to aim for is the scientific 8 hours, plus or minus 8 hours. So even if you come home at 8 in the morning, you do your ritual to fit the circadian rhythm. You keep your bedroom dark even if it's 9 o'clock in the morning. And that's how they do, and they have developed all these apps, the time-shifting apps that deal with aeroplane travel. It's really just switching your circadian rhythm to go with that. So there is a science behind, if you're a night owl, do that, but don't sleep for 2 hours. Make sure that your body, there is a reason we sleep. And the reason behind that is so that your brain can rewire the neurons that kept firing. It can repair them. Your muscles and all of those things that gets active during the day can rest. The problem with us is that we never rest to understand the science behind the need for the body. There's a reason we sleep. It is for the body to repair itself in the entirety of its functions. So I don't know if I've answered that question.
Dr. Diallo, if I may chip in there was something you said, and I really want to agree with it. I know a family in the US, they raised 6 kids, and the man is a doctor, the wife is a nurse. And what they did to raise the family without help, which you could easily see in Africa, was for the woman to work all night and the man to work all day. So there was always a parent at home with the kids. And so all the time I knew this lady, she worked nights throughout her life. you need to see her today. She looks lovely. She should be going to 60. She looks lovely. So what I think she did was exactly what you've said. She has shifted her circadian rhythm. She has adapted to that. That has become her days are now her nights. So the body has adjusted to that. The important thing is that she's getting those 8 to 9 hours sleep every single day. And because that was just how they had to adapt to the situation they found themselves. So the important thing is get those rest in, get that time in, but it shouldn't be something, oh, you don't sleep at night, you don't sleep in the day, you're constantly stressed out. You will pay the price in days to come. Just wanted to share that.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, because I think what you have both touched on is paying attention to your rhythms, paying attention to your patterns, Dr. Therese and Dr. Diao. And the one thing that you had raised with the Book of Awe is something that is also in some philosophies, the art of noticing. We are moving so quickly that presencing often can be communicated as, I need to stay still and clear my mind and breath work. That isn't always necessarily the case. But being present and the art of noticing is, did you see the flower that happened to be on your way to work? Did you hear somebody laugh and think, isn't that a wonderful laugh? It's a way of stopping time and creating space to be able to process the experience of reality. And so there is rest in that kind of pause. There is rest in the art of noticing. And I think as we begin to build the habit of the meditating with the dishes, you see the bubbles come up and you say, oh, aren't bubbles wonderful? It sounds silly, but having an attitude to awe allows us to create space and create time in the moments where we think we are running short. And that's what you possibly see when the person is playing music in the car. And that's what we notice when we hear the birds chirping on the walk. It's creating moments of awe and joy that remind us and actually give us incremental energy boosts without necessarily having the bar. So that is something that I think I take away in terms of being open to that conversation, to create that time and space and the patterns. And I think with that, it is possibly my wanting to ask of the panelists here, both Dr. Diao and Dr. Teresa, to say that we are in various positions in our lives, both in terms of self-leadership, self-mastery, but also because we are across stages in our lives in this conversation, across leadership positions. What can be the one takeaway in terms of our panel before we move into our closing remarks and move in that way that says, how do you, both of you, be able to say, what is the thing that leaders can take away to talk about, does my performance support performance? Does what I do reflect a way to demonstrate that this is the best thing for the collective good of my team or my surroundings? You have already mentioned that you need to model this behavior. But if I had to walk away today and I have to walk into the office tomorrow, what is the one thing that I could do? Is it a checking out meeting, a checking in meeting? What is a practical takeaway? Maybe one or two that as a leader just shifts the mind into awareness to say, maybe I shouldn't click send right now. You know, what would you is a takeaway for the panel's discussion? Each of you, if you have something that you'd like to share with the leaders.
I'll start so that Dr. Teresa can finish.
Yes.
I started off by saying I do this work because I need to put pressure on myself to continue to be questioned. I think it's practice, it's discipline, and I think if I didn't do this work, I'd probably slip further and further back to my old habits. One of the first things I've learned in doing this work is accept to be given feedback, tough feedback, become vulnerable. And I think that feedback for me has come from people that I worked with. Allow yourself on the Monday morning meeting when you check in to be told. And practically, I have been told by a person very young. She says, Doc, you are overwhelming. You're a bit overwhelming. And I was a little bit upset, but I took that to heart and I started working on the way I required of people to be around me. And I started practicing how not to be, because that's actually what creates unsafe spaces for people to do that. I think the second thing is, as you learn this, and I think some of the people talk about how we know this, but it is practice, and because it is practice, you have to repeat it 10,000 times. It's why we're talking about this, so that after this talk, you actually remind yourself, oh, somebody said this about walking. I am now religiously trying to get my knees to walk. And because I'm 66 this year, I'm 4 years away from 70. And more, I realize that if I don't move my body now, it will catch up with me. I'm lucky enough to have my mother's genes. I think that I don't take a tablet that requires curative intervention. So I honor that by actually trying every day to try to practice some of these things. What I eat, what I move, my mental state, my relationships, and all of that together, that holistic look at my wellness has become a practice. And I have to wake up every morning and start with a quiet pause, whether that be prayer. I was just saying to somebody that my day is different if I really start with a very quiet silence of prayer, acknowledging my day, asking for guidance, and then ending the day with prayer to thank God for all the things, because you're human and then you'll continue to make mistakes. So ritual for me has become a very serious practice, and I think that's what I share with anybody that I work with.
All right, so my last words would be that one of the things I realized is how important the community is, and also what affects, especially in the workplace and as a leader, the health of other people in your team influence what happens to you. So you can't in isolation say, well, I'll just take care of myself. It doesn't matter what my secretary does and how the members of my team, because if somebody falls short, the work may fall back on you, and then you find that your burdens are higher. Finally, one of the things I have done for quite a while is to take those words that says my body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. So what I tell myself is, okay, if it was a physical temple and it was a building, a physical building, what would I do after 50 years, after 20 years, after 30 years? Will I need to repaint this building? Will I need to check if the roofs are leaking? Will I need to check if the rafters are broken, if there are crickets, no termites, right? Will I need to check little things that have happened to a building? Even in the house you live in, right? A physical structure, there has to be that time when you need to take off the roof and put another roof. There has to be that time when you say, you know what, the piping needs to be replaced. The water, the plumbing needs to be done. So what I've done, I'm doing a research right now on to say what part of my body is the roof? What part of my body would I consider the plumbing system? Is it my lymphatic system? Is it my arterial system and all of that? So I keep reflecting on my body as a temple. And so one of the things I practically do will be to stand in front of the mirror and say, this is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And right now, I am renewing this temple. The roof of this temple is renewed. I'm repenting this temple. It's time for refurbishment. The foundations of this temple is being reinforced. I invite God to be with me. And so I do this almost every month. I have that ritual where I stand in front of the mirror and renew my temple and rebuild my temple. And then even when I'm out exercising, I talk to God and I say, you know what? You have given me this temple and I'm doing my part to just maintain it. So help me. Keep me strong, keep me healthy. I'm trying not to mess up the work you've done. I'm doing my part. Just help me, do your own part too. And so those little rituals that I do allow me to just live my life in a simple, no pressure way. Eat simply, indulge. If the opportunity comes to eat an ice cream, please do not say, oh, no, I don't want to eat an ice cream. Have fun, eat everything in moderation. I see people that will pass on some of the best things of life because they're watching things. I don't think that's the way it should be. The important thing is start early. Once you have become sick and now you're trying to and now you're trying to cure and trying to heal, that's where the complications come in. But if you have started early, you have maintained your body, you can go to a party and eat your ice cream and have as big a bowl of ice cream as you want. Not that you're doing it every day. So these are some of the practical steps I take by myself to just help me live a healthy life, believing that growing older is not the same thing as being sicker. You have to clear that. You can live long, healthy life as long as you have. We've seen people 100 years and they're walking about, and we've seen people 40 years, they can't climb a flight of stairs. So there's something that they're doing right or wrong. It's just for us to be intentional. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
doctors,
much,
for this absolutely incredible panel. I think that we have been able to engage, we have taken questions, we've had the conversations, and as you talk about feedback, it is the feedback loop of opening ourselves up to be vulnerable as leaders ourselves, to say, what can I learn from my team and those around me? And you, Dr. Teresa, just talking about one's temple in the house. It's the check-in, it's the body scan. Where are we in this temple, and how do we ensure that we make sure we're scheduling that time once a month? Are we going to our annual checkups? We know this, but it is worth saying. Let's not wait until we are unwell. And to bring it back to what you were mentioning right at the beginning, Dr. Teresa, it is prevention and moderation. How do we continue to do that? And to close the panel and just say thank you so much for your time. But before we all run away into our evenings and possibly take time to just debrief and to let this information process this time down, is to ask and maybe respond to some of the questions that have come up, that there is a way to stay connected in this conversation beyond what we have had today and beyond the recording, that the Spiral Aloe and Dr. Diao have created a powerful self-paced executive program called Well Leaders and Well Teams that extends the opportunity to engage with this conversation for those who want to move from managing stress to leading with clarity and balance in conversation and learning through consultation, soundboarding, and leadership. So we're looking forward to inviting you to participate in this conversation. And if you register for the 5 course modules today under the Well Leaders and Well Teams program, you will receive a 50% discount in connecting with us. The 5 modules enable us to talk about lifestyle as the medicine, mental wellness and work-life balance, burnout and sleep, creating psychologically safe spaces at work, and moving from stress to sustainable success. It is a program that we ensure and encourage our engaged community to reflect on in your own way, in your own time, and in this journey of being holistic and integrated individuals. Lean into support, lean into feedback, lean into community. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time, for taking and curating and protecting this pause, creating a boundary to have this conversation and this space with us. Thank you, Dr. Diao. Thank you, Dr. Teresa, for your wisdom, your insight, and your guidance. I'd like to thank our team, our wonderful team who've curated and put together and host what has now been the 6th year of the Spiral Aloe Summit. Dr. At Abe Studios with Joy and Eto, who unfortunately was not able to join us today. Thank you so much for always holding us in this wonderful space and continuing to support the work that is done through this community in lifestyle and holistic well-being. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we wish you a wonderful evening. See you soon, and remember to email us at info@spiralaloe.co.za. See you next time.